Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Clear Walls. This time, we're covering the common pleco, a fish that needs no introduction at first glance. It's the fish that cleans the algae off the walls of a fish tank, right? Strap yourself in, as there's a lot more to the common pleco story than one would think. The common pleco, Hypostomus Wait, you mean to say that there's more than one fish known as the common pleco? Yes. The term common pleco is a bit of a misnomer. You see, common pleco refers to an entire species group of similar looking lower Koreid catfishes. Lower Koreidae is a huge family of fishes with a surprising diversity in forms despite all of them being armored catfishes with a sucking disc for a mouth. The Lower Koreidae is the largest family of catfish with a staggering 1,001 species according to FishBase at the time of recording. In fact, this is the third time I had to revise the number in this script because they kept discovering new ones. This places it among the most speciose fish families on Earth. As for the name pleco, it is indeed short for plecostomus, which was the species name for Hypostomus plecostomus. Hypostomus plecostomus was one of the first Lower Koreid catfishes imported for the aquarium hobby. The name pleco stuck, even when different species of catfish were imported. Because of this, I'm covering Hypostomus plecostomus specifically, and the notable species of Pterygoplichthys here. Yes, you saw that name on the screen. It's pronounced Pterygoplichthys. There, less intimidating. From here, both Hypostomus and Pterygoplichthys will be referred to as pleco, as the shoe fits for both genera in many ways. Lower Koreid catfishes have distinctive features that suit them to a benthic or bottom-dwelling grazing lifestyle in flowing water. These include a suckermouth, adjustable irises, bony armor plates, flexible teeth, and digestive system modifications to facilitate air breathing. Being generalized Lower Koreids, common plecos have all 5 of these features. With the help of these adaptations, Lower Koreids have spread themselves all over South America and got a bit of help from humans to spread worldwide, at least in the warmer places. Of these features, the suckermouth is the best known. Situated under the head, suckermouths have evolved a wide variety of forms across the fishes, often involving expanded lips. But how exactly does a suckermouth work? First of all, we need to establish that Lower Koreid lower jaws function differently to that of any other teleosed fish. Instead of moving up and down like most other vertebrates, pleco jaws move back and forth across the fish's longitudinal axis. It's also a good time to mention that plecos are capable of protruding their upper jaws as well, an ability not present in most catfishes. This is thanks to a Lower Koreid exclusive muscle division on the adductor mandibuli, and a new muscle that directly attached to the highly mobile premaxilla, the small bone that makes up the front of the upper jaw. Since Lower Koreids can protrude their upper jaws, they can scoot themselves across the surface they attach to using only their mouths. The ability to move both jaws back and forth is also great for sweeping and crushing matter into the mouth. With a jaw structure like this, Lower Koreids have no choice but to have a sucking disc for a mouth, since vertical movement is limited in that area. In Adhesive Enigma, I alluded to the Lower Koreid sucker being an open structure. This means that the suction apparatus is exposed to its surrounding environment. However, having a cavity open to the environment would reduce the negative pressure generation required for proper suction. Another major issue is respiration. Plecos have only one hole to inhale with, and that's the mouth. This necessitates the open sucker, as otherwise, the fish wouldn't be able to breathe while its mouth is attached to an object. To solve these problems, the Lower Koreid sucker acts more like a pump than a true suction cup. The sucker is divided into 2 parts, a pre-oral cavity and a post-oral cavity. The pre-oral cavity consists of the lips, barbels, mouth opening, the substrate the fish chooses to adhere to, and the flap of skin called the oral valve. The post-oral cavity is made up of the fish's throat section leading up to the gill slit. The pre- and post-oral cavities work in unison to move water through the fish's mouth. In the similar and sister sucker mouth, water enters the mouth through a small groove created by the barbels and lips during inhalation. The fish can choose to inhale from one or both sides of the suction disc. When the fish is attached to a surface it wants to stick to, the fish first depresses the hyoid or second gill arch and lower jaw regions, which expands the post-oral cavity. The hyoid and lower jaw regions act as an active bellows that drive the water through the suction apparatus into the post-oral cavity. The oral valve, despite being a small flap of skin, is an important part of the mechanism. It separates the pre- and post-oral cavities and controls the water flow through the system. Without it, the fish can't squeeze water out through the gills with sufficient pressure. During this expansion phase, the oral valve is open and the branchiostego or gill plate membrane is closed. The oral valve starts to close in max expansion. It only fully closes well after the fish elevates its hyoid and lower jaw regions and adducts or moves inward into its spensoria, or the bone surrounding the operculum, to start constriction. The fish synchronizes the expansion of its lower jaw and hyoid region. During constriction, the branchiostego membrane opens, allowing water to flow out the gill covers. In max constriction of the post-oral cavity, the oral valve is still closed. It bulges out ventrally, probably due to the water pressure inside the mouth. It starts to open again only when a new expansion phase starts. The fish then expands the oral cavity to start the process all over again. In a 2006 Canadian study referenced in Adhesive Enigma, open lower choroid suckers proved to have less adhesive strength than Rhinocheilus' closed sucker mouth. In exchange for somewhat weaker suction, lower choroids can attach themselves on rougher terrain and in more positions than Rhinocheilus. This study didn't just compare Rhinocheilus to a generalized lower choroid, it included a selection of the most common ones found in aquariums. This includes those Pterygoplichthys pardalis and Hypostomus plecostomus. The draggier, slight downforce producing Pterygoplichthys relies more on direct suction to maintain station and flowing water, while the more streamlined Hypostomus favors underbody friction. The direct follow-up studies showed that Pterygoplichthys' suction and downforce help use less energy as water flow speeds up around it. If you can imagine the speed difference between the rally car and the GT3 race car, you can visualize the difference in suction strength between the open and closed sucker. The lower choroid open sucker is like the rally car. Not as quick outright, but able to maintain its speed on all types of surface. Rhinocheilus suckers are therefore like the GT3 car, faster but only on smooth tarmac surfaces. Lower choroid suckers are also more suited to acquiring food from soft substrates than the Rhinocheilus sucker, which is only effective on the hard, relatively flat surfaces. Lower choroids owe the greater flexibility of their sucker to its flexibility, literally. Pleco jaws are divided into two halves down the middle, allowing the fish to operate both sides independently from each other. This allows for a much greater range of motion and the ability to scrape encrusting matter off of inconvenient crevices that other bottom scrapers cannot access easily. Having a divided lower jaw allows for the asymmetrical jaw strikes which work well when raising algae. Papillae on the lips are another feature that increases the sucker mouth's effectiveness. As I mentioned in the Osteocheilus video, papillae are small, rough keratinous outgrowths covering some part of the fish. The papillae increase the friction generated by the lips by digging into the surface in contact with them. In addition to the papillae, lower choroids also possess unculi on top of them. Unculi are another type of keratinous outgrowth similar to papillae, but are narrower and smaller. Unculi are found exclusively on asteriophytes in fishes like catfishes and tetras. These structures together help increase the friction generated by the sucker mouth. To cushion the complex sucking action, pleco jaws are rich in collagen and other connective tissue. You can guess how fast the water flows in the pleco's native habitat by looking at how fleshy the lips are. The more collagenous, the faster the water the fish comes from, or the harder the substrate. Lower Korea specializing so hard in the suction does come with a couple trade-offs. For one, no Lower Korea is able to close its mouth fully. Manipulating objects with the mouth becomes harder, and the fish can get food stolen away from it much more easily. Good thing the average pleco's diet isn't something that most fish would want to snatch away. The second is their inability to take food from the water column, but that's more on their jaw orientation than the mouth being a disc. They're forced to feed off the substrate, submerged objects, or the very surface of the water. At least their jaw orientation is great for scraping, especially with the 4 rows of teeth. Teeth are known for being one of the toughest structures on the vertebrate's body. Unless you're a client for a stereotypical LMP driver's day job, or a dentist, a vertebrate's teeth are sturdy and able to last for decades. There's a reason that many fossil animals are known for only their teeth. Normally, you wouldn't think that teeth could be anything but sturdy chisels of hydroxyapatite, steadily chopping, slicing, and mashing whatever food comes their way. Right? Wrong. Lower Koreans are the only known vertebrates with flexible teeth. You heard right, flexible teeth. This isn't a trait that the whole family shares, but it's one that Pterygoplichthys has, so it's relevant. As generalists, Pterygoplichthys' teeth have no additional modifications besides their flexibility. Nor is Hypostomus plecostomus, but other members of the genus that eat wood have normal tooth rigidity. As scraping feeders, pleco teeth deal with shear forces along the longitudinal axis that teeth ordinarily don't have to deal with. This problem is compounded by the extra forces that divided jaws put on them, as well as the suction generated by the fish pushing the teeth even harder against the hard surfaces that plecos tend to feed from. With all these compounding factors, normal rigid teeth would break. Okay, but what about the other suckermouth at rayfin fishes? Supretiforms lack teeth and use keratinous processes like unculi and papillae to add friction, while Astroblepus and the suckermouth machokids likely feed by prizing food out of crevices. A less stressful process, but teeth on these fishes has not been investigated yet since they're kinda rare. Now, how do these teeth flex? First of all, most of the tooth's mineralization is restricted to the very tip where the scraping action happens. The tooth itself is made up of 4 sections: a base, a middle portion bitten 90 degrees from the base, a section after that, and then the enameled scraping tip. Therefore, the tooth is shaped like a Z when viewed from the side. The rest of the tooth is composed of dentin and collagen. The reduced mineralization provides the flexibility that the tooth needs to stand up to the forces the fish puts out as it goes about its business. Pleco teeth don't last forever, so only the first row of teeth on the fish's tooth plates are actively used in feeding. Newer teeth grow behind them like they're on a conveyor belt. With the information I just gave about the suckermouth and the teeth, you can compare the feeding apparatus of your average pleco to 4 rakes facing each other on pulleys with a vacuum cleaner plopped in the middle. Everyone who's done garden maintenance has noticed that rakes are slightly flexible to deal with the forces of the human pulling it along the garden waste and the garden waste pushing back. A stiff rake would just snap over time, making it useless in the long term. Not every Lower Korean's teeth are flexible, but the sheer diversity of the family's tooth and jaw morphology has allowed them to colonize all sorts of bottom scraping niches in South America. All catfishes are scaleless, their skin smooth as a baby's bottom. Catfish skin is more durable than that of some other fishes to make up for their lack of scales, but some groups of catfishes evolved another layer of protection. Enter bony body armor. Most Lower Koreans have their entire dorsal surface covered in a layer of overlapping bony plates called scutes. These aren't scales and can be considered an exoskeleton of sorts. The structure of scutes can be compared to that of the tough scales of reptiles. These scutes have a 3-dimensional V shape, unlike the more or less flat nature of typical fish scales. A spongy matrix of collagen is sandwiched between two layers of hydroxyapatite, same substance that makes up a significant portion of bone. The hydroxyapatite layer is composed of laminar or arranged in a single direction fibers, which, in conjunction with the denticles, help reduce shear stress when outer forces are applied, like another fish's tooth. The collagen layer has a mix of pores that are filled with a proteinous substance or filled with nothing. I assume the spongy layer helps absorb impact. This spongy layer is also much thicker than the hydroxyapatite layers, making the pleco scoop resemble a jumbo ice cream sandwich in cross-sectional view. The sandwich-style layout allows for strength and flexibility while minimizing weight. Unlike a knight, the pleco doesn't risk overheating or getting weighed down by its organic exoskeleton. The plates also increase flexibility compared to a layer's solid armor, which is really important for an animal which swims as its primary form of locomotion. Pleco flexibility still pales in comparison to many other fishes though. No such thing as a free lunch. Catfish scutes also have small teeth on their outer surface called denticles or odontodes. Yes, these are actual teeth on the skin of these fishes, complete with pulp, dentine, and all that jazz. Catfish tentacles work similarly to those found in sharks. These backwards pointing projections generate vortices in the water flow over the fish, reducing drag much like the dimples in a golf ball. They also spread out the forces and attacks the fish's armor generates. All these factors combined allow plecos to take blows that will greatly damage other fishes around their size. Eyelids are a revolutionary feature found in most land-loving tetrapods to keep out excess light, keep in moisture, and protect the eyeball. Fishes don't have them. The environment keeps their eyes moist enough, so they have to sleep with their eyes open. This is good for staying alert, but the fish is more susceptible to bright lights disturbing their rest. The distinct shape of an eyeball is also bad for camouflage. As loricariids are benthic, usually nocturnal fishes, camouflage is very important in avoiding predation. The omega iris is an extension of the iris that partially covers the pupil. It extends downward in bright lighting, creating a U-shaped iris much like those found in some rays. Despite the pupil being obstructed, the fish is still capable of seeing behind and ahead of it. Although mammals like me change pupil size without thinking, this ability is rare in fishes. Plecos can't operate their omega iris at the same speed that tetrapods can change their pupil size. In one study, the whole process took roughly 45 minutes. One can compare it to F-Lux, or the brightness-reducing apps on their phone. Such a slow rate of operation means that the omega iris's primary function may not be light reduction, which brings us back to camouflage. Sudden movements are a poor idea if an animal aims to effectively camouflage itself, as most predators who actually catch their food are quite sensitive to motion. If a potential prey item intends to move, it needs to do it slowly if they intend to stay camouflaged. Imagine for a second that you are some sort of benthic nocturnal fish with the ability to move your eyes quickly. You're the same color as the muddy bottom of the pond you live in. You're out during the day for some reason. A larger fish of some sort swims above you. Could it be a predator? You roll your eyes back in your sockets while the larger fish is staring straight at you. It notices the quick motion and lunges forward, making you waste energy you didn't want to expend by swimming away. Of course, this is a hypothetical thought experiment, and the omega iris's function is largely hypothetical. Aerial respiration is a trait that evolved multiple times within the Actinopterygii. Over the millions of years that rayfin fishes have existed, an array of methods have evolved to take advantage of air's higher oxygen concentration compared to what's dissolved in water. In the Loricariidae, aerial respiration takes place in the gut. Loricariids have evolved a variety of gut modifications that allow them to do this. The primitive state in the lower Korean digestive system has the stomach vascularized with blood coming directly from the heart, flowing after the liver into the stomach. But the stars of this video take it to the next level. These modifications allow the fish to use their stomach as a lung of sorts. Incidentally, this is one more difference between Hypostomus and Pterygoplichthys. In both genera, the stomach is enlarged compared to most other lower Koreans. In Pterygoplichthys, the walls are even thinner and supplied more heavily with blood vessels than other lower Koreans, especially in the stomach's posterior section. The thinness of the stomach membrane is comparable to the thinness of other organs that fishes use to breathe air, like the lungs of a lungfish. The stomach is also connected to the body cavity of the fish by an array of interlinked bands of connective tissue. Instead of being drained by the vein going to the liver, the blood drained from the stomach goes to the kidney instead. With the level of vascularization, there may be more metabolic waste produced in other lower Koreans, so the kidneys get the spent blood sooner. Most digestion in lower Koreans occurs in the intestines anyways, so Pterygoplichthys and Hypostomus adapting the stomach as a respiratory organ is no big loss for their ability to process food. As the trilobivorous benthic fishes, it only made sense for Pterygoplichthys to evolve to use the stomach as a respiratory device anyways. Most of the food they eat already enters the digestive tract as slurry in the first place, and the nature of a nutritivorous diet favors constant grazing for optimal digestion. The stomach would be less ideal for digesting such a diet. The swim bladder is the next most obvious choice for a fish to breathe air with. After all, it's connected to the stomach in catfishes, the Hypostomus condition. Many benthic fishes end up losing their swim bladder since it would only help them get swept off the bottom by strong currents. Yet, it still soldiers on in the lower Koreaidae. Why is this? Like in other stereophyton fishes, the swim bladder serves as a hearing aid when filled with gas. It'd be less than ideal for the fish's hearing to have the swim bladder constantly change in size because the fish needs some extra oxygen. Because of this, many other benthic stereophytons use organs other than their swim bladders to breathe atmospheric air with. Calictiid catfishes and cobated loaches use the posterior halves of their intestines, for example. With their modified stomachs, Pterygoplichthys and Hypostomus catfishes can breathe air effectively enough to drive out of the water for over 24 hours. For a fish that lives in rivers that run the risk of drying up seasonally, this stability is a godsend. However, air breathing isn't the most convenient thing for a benthic fish that spends much of its time hidden under cover, so the fish still has quite functional gills, more so than those of some other fishes that breathe air. Obviously, the fish runs the risk of being spotted by predators above and below when it surfaces for air, so the fish only gulps air when dissolved oxygen runs low. Larger specimens of Hypostomus plecostomus have a larger gill surface area to meet the higher oxygen demand the larger body entails. This is accomplished by the gill filaments possessing a high amount of lamellae, which are even smaller filaments the gases are exchanged through, for filament. Since plecos have two highly efficient methods of breathing, they can deal with all sorts of changing conditions without worrying about running out of oxygen. Life is tough for wild fishes. It's even tougher for fishes that live in bodies of water prone to drying up as the seasons change. We covered some of the traits that plecos evolved to deal with the water levels getting low with the dissolved oxygen levels following suit, but what about if the water doesn't exist anymore? Many fishes, when faced with such a situation, usually die. Others, like lungfishes, dig themselves a nice hole in the ground and wait for the rainy season. Plecos take the more proactive approach. They travel across land to reach livable bodies of water if conditions take a nosedive. You heard me right. These fishes are capable of intentionally traveling across land. But doesn't their armor get in the way? And how do they control their movement? These very questions were asked and answered by one Noah Bressman, who noted the method to their madness was so peculiar that he coined a new term for it, reffling. Why reffling? It's short for repetitive flinging. Most fishes capable of traveling across land or the substrate of their habitats use their paired fins similarly to how tetrapods use their feet, as contact patches and force generators as they travel on the ground. As heavily armored fishes, this locomotion method would be nearly impossible as they lack the range of motion needed to effectively belly crawl. Reffling involves the mouth, paired fins, and tail to fling the fish across the ground at a pace faster than any fish has any right traveling on land. The fish's body moves in an uneven wave-shaped stride, or whatever you call a reffling motion. To start a reffle, the fish first moves its head and tail towards the side to have a greater amplitude, retracting the pectoral and pelvic fins on that side. Using the tail and fins on the other side, the fish flings itself forward. The fish gains purchase on the ground with its mouth and readies itself for another fling. As awkward as this sounds, reffling is apparently one of the fastest ways a fish can travel on dry land under its own power. Paradoxically, the stiff body of the pleco helps it move more quickly as it helps transfer the force generated by its movement more effectively. One skeletal modification that's important to this is the link between the pelvic girdle and the exoskeleton. This helps transfer the force between the pelvic girdles and the spine, ensuring that the fish loses less energy from the girdle moving in respect to the spine. As for the asymmetrical nature of reffling, the fish manages this by using the mouth to position itself in its desired direction. Moving across land would ordinarily be exhausting for animals not used to it, so the paired fin girdles are highly vascularized for greater oxygen transfer, increasing endurance. Although this coverage of Pleco's physical features make them seem quite specialized, they still are, they're still quite generalized for lower choriids. How generalized? This next taxonomy section will show you where the common pleco lineage fits on the pleco family tree. The fishes we call common pleco are found in Hypostominae, tribe Hypostomini. This is a clade of relatively stocky, large-bodied lower choriid sister to the huge Ancestrini tribe at the crown of the family. How does one tell Hypostomus apart from Pterygoplichthys? Typically, Pterygoplichthys catfishes have more dorsal fin rays, 11 to 15, than Hypostomus, which has 7. Pterygoplichthys roughly means winged weapon fish in Greek, and the dorsal fins of some of the members of the genus look much like the sail on a boat. As for Hypostomus, that means underneath mouth. Hypostomus catfishes also have a sickle-shaped operculum or gill cover compared to the straight operculum found in Pterygoplichthys. Hypostomus also has one plate between the preopercle or bony plate ahead of the gill cover and the exposed opercle compared to 2 or 3 found in Pterygoplichthys. The cheek plates in Hypostomus are less fragmented compared to Pterygoplichthys, which has the most fragmented cheek plates of the lower choriidae. Pterygoplichthys and Hypostomus also differ in details of the ovarian apparatus, which is a complex of bones at the head space that improves their hearing ability, and clectrum, which is the bone roughly equivalent to a fish shoulder shape. Most of the differences between the two genera require a good set of eyes and or a dead fish to suss out, so it's obvious how these fish were confused with each other in the past. Hypostomus plecostomus was described by Linnaeus in 1758. Or was it? 4 years before Linnaeus' seminal work, Systema Naturae, was published, he and his patron Jan Frederick Gronovius described the fish that Gronovius dubbed a plecostomus, plecostomus meaning golden mouth. At the time, Linnaeus considered it a weird-looking sturgeon and named it Asapinter indica, estimated that the Amazon were still called Indians. This isn't a surprising view to take, as both sturgeons and plecos are armored and have mouths located entirely under their heads. Sturgeons and catfishes aren't related in the slightest, however, and any resemblance between a pleco and sturgeon can be boiled down to convergent evolution. The name was changed to Asapinter plecostomus in Systema Naturae. Pieter Bleecker, the man who discovered the clown loach, created the genus Plecostomus for the fish when he realized that it looked nothing like any adaptation. This genus was synonymized with Hypostomus in the 1980s, making it invalid as of now. The genus Hypostomus was erected in 1803 by Leopard to describe Hypostomus guaccari. Hypostomus guaccari ended up being a synonym for Hypostomus plecostomus, so that name is never used nowadays. By that time, scientists realized that plecos were catfishes and not weird-looking sturgeons. In the couple of centuries that passed between Hypostomus plecostomus' initial discovery and eventual description, scientists discovered tens of Hypostomus species which were accidentally synonymized with Hypostomus plecostomus since they looked so similar. This has led to much confusion when describing the true Hypostomus plecostomus and its native range. To add to the confusion when describing new plecos, the original type specimens for Hypostomus plecostomus were lost for centuries before eventually being rediscovered. Turns out Linnaeus himself confused Hypostomus plecostomus with Hypostomus wallata, but he did get his hands on a true plecostomus. Hypostomus plecostomus was redescribed in 2012 because of this new discovery. Astroblepus, the first member of its genus known to Western science, was described as Hypostoma, with an A, E. tentaculatum in the ancient year of 1829. Now known as Pterygoplichthys E. tentaculatus, this is a standard-looking pleco hailing from the San Francisco River Basin. It's not time to talk about individual fishes yet, so hold the name in your head for now. Notice the different spelling. Either way, the similarities in appearance between Hypostomus and Pterygoplichthys were apparent this early. The name Pterygoplichthys was coined by T.N. Gill in 1858, a good few years after many of the common species in the genus were first known by science. Perhaps Gill noticed the impressive finish of some members of quote-unquote Hypostomus and created the name to encompass these specific fishes, like the former Hypostomus parlus. Really remember the second name. Pterygoplichthys itself would be divided into two more genera in 1991 by Weber, Liposarcus and Glyptopteryctes. Liposarcus contained the fishes lacking tegodontodes, which just so happened to be the most commercially important member of the group, and Glyptopteryctes contained the fishes with a dorsal crest. Don't bother learning these names now, since they returned to synonymy with Pterygoplichthys around 2004. The differences are too minor, and leaving these names valid would render Pterygoplichthys paraphyletic, a big no-no in the world of taxonomy. Paraphyletic means that all the members of a taxon don't share one common ancestor. You thought Liposarcus would give us a break from saying Pterygoplichthys, huh? Anyways, Pterygoplichthys contains almost all the fishes known today as common plecos, so I'm not going to bother exploring the genera split from and return to synonymy with Hypostomus. That's too many. Since this fish lent its name to the entire grouping, it's only fair that I cover its diagnostic features before I go into Pterygoplichthys. Hypostomus also comes first alphabetically, which is a more minor reason. Anyway, let's get a good picture in your head of what the true common pleco looks like. Hypostomus plecostomus originally hailed from bodies of water in Northeast South America, encompassing countries like Guyana, Suriname, and northeastern Brazil. Due to the aquarium trade, the fish, or other similar-looking Hypostomus, now inhabits waters in Texas and other warm places. Though this fish's similarity to other Hypostomus, as well as Pterygoplichthys, has led to a case or two, or more than a few, of mistaken identity. Hypostomus plecostomus appears to be less widespread as an invasive than the Pterygoplichthys is mistaken for frequently. In life, the fish is light to medium grayish-brown with circular black spots. These streaked, circular spots are key, as the spots on many Pterygoplichthys are more irregular. This won't help much when comparing Hypostomus plecostomus to other members of the genus, but only one Pterygoplichthys has this color pattern. The dorsal fin is also more triangular in shape, compared to the long horizontal sail-shaped dorsal fins of the other genus. Hypostomus plecostomus is also a more streamlined looking fish than the other genus, though the differences are subtle. Now, if you want help distinguishing this pleco from the other Hypostomus, better hope the fish in question lives in the Guianas and matches this description. Good luck. According to the paper redescribing the fish, Hypostomus plecostomus has villiform teeth kind of like Pterygoplichthys with a short crown. There's also a preanal plate under the abdomen and some technical stuff for the cranial armor plates, which will ruin the video's flow if I go into detail. You'll need good eyes, knowledge of the genus, and the aforementioned luck to pin down the exact species. Some of these other Hypostomus have found their way into aquaria, like Hypostomus punctatus. On to other things, the fish reportedly reaches the size of over 20 inches long. Other reports claim they hover around 12 to 14 inches, but with how similar many Hypostomus look, this could be a case of mistaken identity. FishBase made mention of this, claiming a maximum length of 50 centimeters at one point, or 20 inches, with a common length of 28 centimeters, which is around 11 inches. This was corrected sometime this year, with the fish now reaching a maximum size of 24 centimeters. Another point adding to the Hypostomus plecostomus is smaller than Pterygoplichthys on average theory is that many other Hypostomus reach a size of just under a foot long. Therefore, they make more suitable curved specimens than Pterygoplichthys if this is true. Pterygoplichthys is a genus of largely similar looking fishes. As of now, the genus contains a moderate 16 described species, half of which are at least somewhat common in the aquarium trade. One must not discount the potential of hybridization between the species and commercial production as well. If you see a pleco with over 7 dorsal fin rays and or 2 to 3 movable cheek plates on each side, it's most likely a Pterygoplichthys. If you really want to make sure, you can dissect the fish and look for an enlarged stomach for aerial respiration that I mentioned earlier. Usually counting the dorsal fin rays is enough, or you can count the vertebrae between the dorsal fin and the hyperoble. There should be 8 to 11 vertebrae. These dorsal fin rays give the genus the common name Sailfin catfishes. Despite me naming these common traits among Pterygoplichthys catfishes, there is no real physical synapomorphy linking them all together. Now let's introduce our other 16 stars of the show. Pterygoplichthys ambroseti is known as a snow king pleco for those who care enough to distinguish it from other Pterygoplichthys. The name Pterygoplichthys anisitsi is a synonym. Discovered in 1893 by Holmberg, the fish is found in the Rio Plata Basin, Paraguay, Rio Paraná, Bermejo, and the Uruguay rivers, in the countries of Paraguay, Bolivia, the north and northeast of Argentina, and the west of Uruguay. It's been found in Texas since the 1990s. It gets its name from the white vermiculated pattern it has on its body, which makes it look like it's got left outside in Alaska overnight. As a tropical fish, Pterygoplichthys ambroseti does not enjoy the cold and will most likely roll over and die if exposed to water below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So much for being the Snow King. Originally placed in the genus Hypostomus, the fish was removed from the genus when scientists did a genetic analysis of the species and remembered that Hypostomus has less than 8 dorsal rays. This fish more closely resembles the average Hypostomus in appearance, even sharing the smaller stomach and gill opening with that genus. This convergence can be thanks to the fish living in fast waters, which necessitates certain adaptations to avoid getting swept away. Pterygoplichthys chrysostictus has 9 to 10 dorsal rays. When you're not counting fin rays, this fish is distinguished by its cool golden spots on a dark background. Wait, that's the meaning of chrysostictus. It also is more manageable in home aquaria, reaching a rack size of 25 centimeters, or about 10 inches. Another quote-unquote common pleco, originally hailing from the Amazon's Madeira Basin. This one is distinguished by its large size, even for a member of the genus. The monstrous disjunctivus can reach a maximum size of 70 centimeters, or 28 inches. Not every individual out there is that big, so another way to distinguish this fish, especially from the very similar Pterygoplichthys pardalus, is its worm-like or vermiculated belly pattern. Pterygoplichthys disjunctivus has been recorded to hybridize freely with Pterygoplichthys pardalus, so some scientists have proposed that the two fishes may be the same species after all. As a representative of the common plecos, this fish has been found in countries it didn't usually hail from, like the Philippines and warmer states like Florida and Texas. It goes without saying that many people with no business keeping this fish dump them in the wild once they grew too large for their home aquaria. It's a Brazilian pleco that grows to about a foot long, notable for being the first Pterygoplichthys to be described by science. Otherwise, it's a bog standard member of the genus. It's a chocolate brown fish with darker spots and/or vermiculations, a fitting template for what would be discovered later. Etendeculatus refers to its nearly non-existent barbels, as Pterygoplichthys has short barbels in the first place. Pterygoplichthys gibiceps is one of the most recognizable individual fishes in this genus. This fish originally came from the upper Rio Negro, but is bred in fish farms in tropical countries to fulfill the aquarium trade. Sporting a rich brick red base color covered in hundreds of brown spots, this catfish also has one of the largest dorsal fins in the genus. This is also one of the plecos possessing a crest atop the head, so the fish was briefly placed in the genus Hypostomus, an anagram of Pterygoplichthys. In fact, its specific name refers to the aforementioned crest. Gibiceps' distinctive appearance has saved it from being lumped in with the common plecos placed in aquarium stores, though many have suffered the same treatment as their less showy cousins. They tend to cost a little bit more, so that keeps them out of a few unsuitable homes where the cheaper common pleco is right there and looks pretty dang similar. It's about suitable for the home aquarium and its less flashy relatives, with the potential to grow close to 20 inches long. This fish is reportedly less tolerant for conditions than Pterygoplichthys pardalus, so it hasn't spread as far as its invasive relatives, if it's even developed invasive populations in the first place. Like pardalus, this fish is spawned in great quantities in fish farms, so the potential for invasion is always there. It only takes a few escapees. Another crested sailfin pleco, named after ichthyologist Jose Lima de Figueiredo. This fish has a patterning of golden spots on a dark background. Notable for being one of the first L number plecos, L numbers being codes given to undescribed or unknown plecos by aquarists before they were officially described. L number plecos now number in the hundreds and come in a kaleidoscope of colors and patterns. Despite the diversity, it's humorous how the first L number described was pretty much just a fancy gibiceps with cool patterning. Unlike gibiceps, this fish only reaches about a foot long, so it can be kept in large aquaria more feasibly. It's a minor invasive species in Singapore, where it competes with a wide variety of other invaders, including other Pterygoplichthys. This fish heavily resembles Pterygoplichthys gibiceps, Hoselima and Parnaibe. It was formerly a Glycopteryctes after all. This one comes from the Rio Madeira basin. It reached a smaller max size of 14 inches though. Its base color is very dark brown with yellow squiggly lines, similar to a young snow king pleco. These squiggly lines led near to give the species name of Literatus. This fish has a lighter base color than some of its relatives. If anything, it looks like the true Hypostomus plecostomus in coloration. It comes from the Orinoco River system in Guyana, so it's less Brazilian than its close relatives. Its whopping 14 dorsal rays led to the specific name Multiradiatus, so it's easy to tell apart from nearby Hypostomus. This is very likely the fish you see today, when the average pet shop has a tank full of common plecos for sale. Its high demand means that it's mass-produced in fish farms. Like many other mass-produced fishes, intentionally bred color variation exists, like albinos and xanthistic forms. The most unique color variation produced from artificial selection so far is the chocolate pleco, eschewing the spotted pattern for a plain yellowish-brown body. Thanks to its ubiquity in the aquarium trade, this fish, along with its close relatives, has made itself at home in many tropical countries. The pattern on top is highly variable, leading to much confusion between it and its close relatives. Castle null compared to a leopard's pattern, though the fish isn't very yellowish. Its variability even landed an L number, L023, but Pterygoplichthys pardalus had long been described by science by the time it was assigned one. If you want to know what kind of common pleco you have, flip it over. You can distinguish this fish from the other by its spotted abdominal pattern, and very disjunctive as its vermiculated pattern. Hybrids of this fish with the other species of Pterygoplichthys are common, so this isn't a guaranteed method. Its eventual size of 16 inches makes it an unsuitable choice for most aquaria, despite being one of the hardiest fishes you can keep. This fish heavily resembles Pterygoplichthys gibbosiceps. It reaches a smaller max size of 11 inches though. Its base color is very dark brown with yellow vermiculations, similar to a young snow king pleco. Wait, didn't I say this already? However, its vermiculations are more connected on the belly than those of Littoratus. This one is found in the Rio Parnaíba Basin in the state of Maranhão, in Brazil. Pterygoplichthys punctatus can be distinguished from all other members of the genus besides Pterygoplichthys weberi by having a divided buccal papilla. Huge difference. Pterygoplichthys punctatus has small spots instead of the large ones in Pterygoplichthys weberi, which is hinted at in a specific name which means dotted. This is another one of the crested plecos along with Pterygoplichthys gibbosiceps. Unlike Pterygoplichthys gibbosiceps, Pterygoplichthys scrophus lacks the impressive patterning and instead has a plain medium brown body color which can be broken up by large patches of darker brown. Ironically, the lack of spots makes this fish the most distinctive looking in the genus. In addition, the fish possesses two large flaps of skin above both nostrils in case you mistake this fish for any other loricariid. The keels on the scutes are also more apparent thanks to the more uniform coloration. This has led to a few interesting common names, like Rhino Pleco and Alligator Pleco. Ironically, none of these names have anything to do with pigs, as the specific name refers to one. It's a moderately frequent import for aquaria and is on the smaller size for the genus, reaching around 10 inches long. Brown and spotted and big. Is it brown with hundreds of black spots or black with an interesting vermiculated pattern? It's up to you to decide. This pleco of all time lives in Colombia's Magdalena River Basin. Want the classic pleco look without most of the classic pleco size? Get Ancestris. Oh, they're too rounded? Too tentacled? I have the perfect fish for you. Enter Pterygoplichthys weberi. Unlike most of its relatives, this fish can be reasonably kept in the home aquarium as it only reaches 7 inches long. For those of y'all keeping track, this is the smallest member of the genus. Juveniles have stripes on the fins, which break up into spots as the fish grows. Adults look a lot like Hypostomus plecostomus in coloration, but the smaller adult size and larger dorsal fin give the game away. Pterygoplichthys weberi is also the most recent fish in the genus to be described by science. In Jonathan Armbruster's paper reevaluating the genus, as well as introducing the fish to the scientific world. It's brown and spotted, but less big. It only reaches 10 inches long according to Planet Catfish, but fish face has it reaching 15 inches. Has white spots as an adult. Unlike its close relatives, it's potentially facing extinction as it only lives in the Rio Xingu in Brazil, a biodiverse waterway with the looming threat of the Belo Monte Dam construction. The Xingu is home to many more colorful smaller loricariids, so it's unlikely you'll see this fish in the aquarium when other plecos exist. From Lake Maracaibo, so you aren't seeing it in aquaria anytime soon. Imports from that region are rare, named after the Zulia state in Venezuela. Now that the extremely technical things are over with, let's cover how plecos interact with their environment, how people interact with them, and their history in the aquarium hobby.
Plecos are a benthic group of fishes. When your ancestors evolved to let the flow of rivers pass over them instead of swimming against them, swimming becomes a bit less important. Pterygoplichthys and Hypostomus plecos are medium-sized generalist herbivores/omnivores. You can compare their ecological niche to rhinos, goats, and hogs on land. They breed and dig like hogs, are armored like rhinos, and deal with current like goats do with cliffs. Common plecos live in marshes, lakes, and rivers at the mercy of tropical seasons. They can survive water conditions that can kill weaker fishes. Those armor plates aren't for show. Plecos really are hardy, adaptable fishes. They're only limited by the minimum water temperature they can survive, which is about 48 degrees Fahrenheit or 9 degrees Celsius. Pterygoplichthys can even tolerate salinity levels of up to 10 parts per thousand. The key word is tolerate, as the fishes were clearly stressed when experimentally exposed to brackish water. The dry season means exactly what it sounds like for tropical water bodies. They often dry up. Before they dry up, they become stagnant, and fishes capable of leaving the area leave for fresher waters if possible. Their air-breathing ability comes in handy during the tropical dry season these fishes have to deal with. You've probably seen those Amazon River documentaries that show the rivers drying up and the poor fishes struggling to breathe as they become lunch for an otter or something. Plecos are still common otter food, but they can reffle on land or bury themselves in mud to escape the dry conditions. When the rivers are actually flowing, plecos typically live a solitary life under some sort of shelter during the day. The pleco protects its hiding place from other catfishes as they are somewhat territorial. After all, it can't be comfortable to lie on top of another heavily armored catfish, is it? When the sun goes down, the fish come out to graze on the algae that took energy from the sun just a few hours prior. Algae isn't the only food item taken, as these fishes will consume anything that's at the bottom of a body of water that's no ability to escape. Detritivores like plecos don't need much protein, with 25% being all that's needed in their diet for healthy growth in aquaculture conditions. Any excess is deposited in the muscles, so it's not going to waste. A study of Lower Korea's gut content stated that Hypostomus and Pterygoplichthys had the lowest protein diet of the entire study. Ironically, wild Hypostomus punctatus consumed more detritus than algae according to studies of stomach contents. It's still a heavy part of the Pterygoplichthys diet, so feeding habits are one more similarity that the fishes share out of hundreds. This is not a nutritious diet, so plecos have long intestines to process all the detritus and algae they spray up on a daily basis. Detritus itself is composed of structural polysaccharides and other nutrient-depleted flotsam, which provide food and homes for microbe colonies. The microbes are where most of the nutrients come from, and they're much more quickly processed than the detritus itself. The pleco digestive strategy is to consume a lot of low-quality food, process the quickly digestible bits, and pass it through the systems fast. How fast? A study with red-dyed wood showed that a panak pooped red after about 4 hours post-consumption. Wood is one of the few items the Pterygoplichthys doesn't get adequate sustenance from, thanks to the specialized bacteria required for its digestion that no pleco has. Animals that live off a low-quality diet like this tend to grow fairly large at how the digestive system needed to process it. A pleco's grazing habits run counter to a lack of food available when the bodies of water dry up. How do they not immediately starve? When times get lean, plecos can live off their fat reserves, as well as reabsorb their intestinal lining somewhat until they find better conditions. A diet of algae detritus is also rich in phosphorus. And guess which mineral besides calcium that bones are also rich in? Plecos' grazing habits and diets make them environmental phosphorus sinks, as they sequester it in their armor. This and their air breathing make them great at colonizing eutrophic waters. Phosphorus is required for these fish's proper growth, and what do you know? less polluted South American waters aren't very phosphorus-rich, naturally limiting pleco populations. Now it's time for featherfin films first. Pleco spawning habits are nothing like the perenniform egg gatherers I've covered before. Males dig burrows in river banks for the female to lay a clump of 500 to 3,000 adhesive eggs in. Males and females look pretty similar. In Hypostomus, the males grow larger and have larger fins, while the females are slightly plumper. After she's emptied the ovaries, the male kicks out the female and fiercely guards the spawn against intruders. The yolky eggs hatch in about a week. Newly hatched plecos come out the egg with the suckermouth fully formed, and they're capable of swimming a couple days later. Their digestive tract opens up after the second day of life, as it prepares for years of constant throughput. Papa pleco is usually gone by this time, leaving the precocial fry to fend for themselves. By the time a week passes, the yolk sac has been entirely absorbed, and the young plecos can go on living life as an adult pleco would. They reach maturity in about 2 years. Despite their armor, plecos do have a decent amount of predators. Larger fishes capable of swallowing meals whole and crushing things through their pharyngeal teeth often enjoy a meal of young pleco on the half shell. Birds snag unlucky plecos from above, while giant river otters can just tear into it, even the largest pleco with no real issue. Crocodilians are also capable of punching through the armor for a crunchy meal. Even with these predators, plecos are unlikely to go down without a fight, and many a bird is choked to death trying to force one down the throat. Score 1 for Team Fish. Plecos also have an additional trick up their sleeve to ward off predators. Sounds produced by stridulation of the pectoral fin. Many catfishes are capable of this, so I don't think it deserves its own feature breakdown. Plecos lucky and evasive enough to avoid predation should expect to live at least 7 years in the wild. In captivity, this can be tripled with the right care. This is plenty of time for one to run into people or spread their genes to new bodies of water. In their native waters, plecos serve as the occasional food source. Turns out that being able to breathe air lets them stay fresh for longer in open-air fish markets. In tropical countries where refrigeration is rare, this trait is a godsend for fishmongers. Removing the skin is a pain until the fish is cooked, so plecos are typically cooked in the shell. Once you get past the bony outer layer, you're rewarded with a white meat that fillets easily with few bones. Despite appearances, about 42% of the meat is usable, a comparable value to other catfishes, but this is according to Brazilian standards as they use to fish in stews. Plecos don't spend that much time swimming, so their tail muscles are heavily oxygenated, hence the white meat. They are reported to taste pretty good if they're cooked correctly and have a texture similar to that of a lobster. Much like a lobster, most of the meat is in the tail section. The rest of the fish, minus the entrails, could potentially be used in the stock or broth. Pleco armor is rich in collagen, so it might gel well when left in the refrigerator. Lower Koreans of all types are normally caught by spearfishing or with nets, since hooking a benthic fish with an inferior mouth is inconvenient. Here comes the fun part. Thanks to us humans not doing proper research on adult fish sizes, plecos have become an important new part of tropical waterways worldwide. That's right, Featherfin film has welcomed its first set of invasive species. Plecos have been found in Texas, Florida, California, Nevada, Alabama, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Mexico, the Philippines, India, Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Turkey, Thailand, Japan, China, the United Kingdom and even the hot spring in Hungary. Most of the introduced plecos are part of the former Lapisarchus complex, with less common reports of gibiceps. Hypostomus is sometimes seen in the southern US, as mentioned before. In fact, in some parts of Texas, the two genera compete with each other. In the lands where plecos have fewer checos, they started to do ecological damage. These fishes have even been banned from importation into India because of this. Evolving in the crucible of tropical South America has made Pterygoplichthys and Hypostomus excellent in invading disturbed warmer waters. A eutrophied body of water that doesn't go dry, with no predators to know to deal with plecos, makes for pleco heaven. Many of these warmer countries that plecos invade are on the second or third stage of their industrial revolution, and that means more polluted water bodies turn green with algae and choke out many fishes. Their spawning behavior has led to increased river durability and collapsed riverbanks thanks to the males digging holes in the sides of the riverbanks to guard offspring, which will go on to do the same thing in a couple of years. Their feeding habits are also highly disruptive for any other bottom grazer, since they suck up all of the algae and detritus that native fishes and tadpoles would otherwise consume. To add insult to injury, they enjoy a meal of fresh caviar and will raid the spawning grounds of other fishes. As bottom grazers, they tend to bioaccumulate heavy metals and coliform bacteria, so fish from polluted water should be taken with caution. Plecos also like to graze on the skins of resting manatees in Blue Spring Run, Florida. Only adult plecos appear to exhibit this behavior so far. The manatees themselves seem annoyed by this behavior, especially since the catfish sometimes leave marks. To a pleco, most manatees are vulnerable to fey because algae and other organisms encrust their skin. This is a food resource taken advantage of by few fishes in Florida, and none with the grazing efficiency of Pterygoplichthys. In subsistence fishing communities, plecos ruin nests with their spawny bodies, in addition to competing with the fishes that they usually eat. In Mexico, plecos are so reviled that natives call them pez diablo, or devilfish. Mexico is a case of an intentional introduction gone wrong, as the fishes were initially introduced just to control algae and only that. Like many organisms sent to fix the problem that only humans can perceive, it backfired and aquatic habitat productivity has noticeably declined since. Some Mexicans even erroneously believe that the fish is talking to eat. It's not. Tell your Mexican friends. To be fair, it looks like nothing else swimming around these days, so you can see where they're coming from. Back to food, a company known as Akari is attempting to make products for both humans and pets of Mexican pleco meat. They claim that the fish made up 70% of smaller freshwater fish catches in Mexico, and their jerky company has made a significant dent in that number. Pleco meal is about as good as any other white fish meal nutrition-wise, so the potential is there for pleco-based pet food products. A study replaced the fish meal normally used in farming Pangasianodon gigas, or the Mekong giant catfish, with pleco meal, with absolutely no side effects. Another study has experimented with the feasibility of turning the fish into biodiesel. Fish processing leads to significant waste that ordinarily becomes fertilizer or pet food, so fish byproducts are a cheap source of biomass to process into fuel. Oily fish waste like salmon has too many polyunsaturated fatty acids to be viable compared to commercial diesel, so white fishes like plecos are a more viable choice. Pleco biodiesel compared favorably with commercial biodiesel and its chemical makeup, but it's more likely to oxidize thanks to a higher concentration of polyunsaturated methyl esters. That's nothing an antioxidant added to the mix can't fix. Armored catfish eradication efforts have already begun in the United States, with promising results in Florida and Texas. As for the latter state, a targeted spearfishing program in the clear, invasive species-packed San Marcos River has reduced their numbers noticeably, with 6,000 removed from the gene pool over 4 years. When I went a few years back, I still saw a couple of babies, so it wasn't completely effective, but the Great Freeze of 2021 also put a massive dent in Texas pleco population. Not every place in the world has any resources committed to removing the bases of the USA, so I'm not so sure how well spearfishing tournaments will work in, say, India. At this point, straight eradication of efforts beyond regional levels would be horribly expensive, so we either need to learn to live with these invaders or find some type of market niche for them. At least they're welcome in the aquaria sometimes. Pleco serve as the face of algae control in aquaria. No matter how many new fishes get introduced to the hobby or how many aquarists learn of their potential size, when someone thinks of an aquarium fish that consumes algae, a catfish under the common Pleco umbrella is often the first fish they think of. One of the most iconic images in the hobby is of a Pleco attached to the side of an aquarium, rasping away at the algal growth. Hypostomus has been known to the aquarium hobby long ago as the 1890s, where it was known as a peaceful fish that could replace snails as an algae cleaner. As an algae eater or scavenger, Plecos do an adequate job of eating most of the salty material found growing in an aquarium. Long filamentous algae gets ignored. Despite being effective algae eaters, the common Plecos have two massive drawbacks limiting their reasonable use in aquaria: their eventual size and their waste production. As mentioned in the earlier section of the video, Pterygoplichthys Plecos can potentially reach about 2 feet in length. Hey, at least they don't require large groups. A 2-foot-long and flexible fish isn't practical to keep in small tanks, which leads to many aquarists ditching their fish. Stores and public aquaria are often inundated with people putting up overgrown algae eaters for adoption. When those places invariably get overwhelmed, people end up dumping the fish in the local water body. As you heard earlier, this is bad, so I'm not going to detail about it again. As for the other point, the nature of Pleco's diet and digestive system leads to copious strings of waste left behind all over the aquarium. Like cattle, the droppings help fertilize the algae they feed on. For the aquarist, the poop strings mean they have to clean the tank more than they would have without the armored algae eater. If you can provide roomy living quarters and strong filtration, Pterygoplichthys catfishes prove robust and straightforward to keep. Like most catfishes, Plecos need a place to hide during the day. You'll need more hiding places if the fish is to live with other bottom dwellers. As the fish ages, it becomes more territorial, necessitating extra hides if the owner aims to maintain harmony in the future. Otherwise, the fish tends not to pick fights with its tank mates. Larger Plecos can and will defend themselves if threatened. One of the people I was able to contact who actually owns a plecostomus claims that her fish, which is about 11 inches long, outright attacks her similarly sized Oscar without provocation sometimes. If that's the case for the species and not just a rogue with a chip on its shoulder, then keepers should watch their Hypostomus for signs of aggression as they grow. Since Plecos are tridivores and algivorous, you should feed them seeking food or vegetable content. This can include actual vegetables like cucumber or broccoli. They aren't picky when they realize where additional food comes from, which is you. In the race for sustenance that occurs whenever food enters the tank, the Pleco is a back marker at first. If you primarily feed floating food in this little algal growth, the fish will either starve or learn to eat from the surface. To increase the likelihood of your Pleco getting adequate sustenance, feed at night, with the tank lights off. Eventually, the fish may learn to grab food when the lights are on. If you're lucky enough to have a bright Pleco, you can drop food straight into its mouth as it floats upside down. As a bottom-dwelling fish, Pleco bellies aren't as easy to see as those of pelagic species, but their penchant for sucking on the aquarium walls lets you check their condition. Don't let your Pleco get a sunken belly. Since this fish grows so large and is readily available for a low price in the big chain fish stores, nobody's tried to breed common Plecos in the home aquarium. The potential breeder is going to need a mud-bottom pond or some huge caves and several large Plecos. If they're as willing to spawn as ancestors are, then you should expect to see babies for too long. Many farms in Florida can skip the conditioning broodstock part and grab eggs from the wild to raise. Pleco spawning habits with the sticky egg clumps and convenient burrows make life easy for the enterprising fish farmer to grab the fish eggs from the wild. This may be the reason that there's few domestic Pterygoplichthys strains. The broodstock, at least in the States, is taken directly from the wild. Albino, chocolate, and albino chocolate Pterygoplichthys strains exist, as well as albino Hypostomus, but that's about it for fancy common Plecos. The better question is, why would you even homebreed Plecos as a hobbyist? You're breeding fish that probably won't give you store credit and may struggle to find homes. There's plenty of lower creeks you can breed without having to dig a pond. If you're keeping the fish in the pond, make sure it's heated in the winter, there's somewhere for the fish to hide, and there's no outlet to any local water bodies. Enough algae to grow outside to keep a pleco well fed, especially if it's sharing the home with the ornamental carps. Speaking of appropriate living quarters, I've noticed that the common plecos are rightfully fading in popularity in fish tanks these days. They're a big commitment and deserve keepers that can properly meet their needs. Ancestors, shrimp, Autocinclus, and Crocodylus have largely supplanted Pterygoplichthys for algae control in many fish tanks I've seen online. While this observation can be skewed by the fact that most people posting their fish tanks online have bothered to do research on suitable denizens of their tanks, and therefore steer clear of the whole king beast that uproot all the plants and leave strings of poop all over the tank like a house that just got TP'd. Speaking of pleco discussion online, in the earlier days of the internet, there was a superstition of typing up pleco/plecostomus, leading to the deaths of the poor fish. To combat this, the E in pleco was censored. The practice died out a couple decades ago. Despite the fading popularity, could the name actually be cursed? Pterygoplichthys are still a common sight in large chain fish stores and tend to be some of the cheaper algae eaters, which guarantees sales. This isn't the first time the common pleco got replaced. The switch from Hypostomus, plecostomus, and Pterygoplichthys species, the most common pleco to find in stores, was reportedly sometime in the 1980s, when Asian fish farmers learned to produce Pterygoplichthys in mass. As of a 1997 paper that revealed Crocodylus cost 6 cents to import on average, what's known as Hypostomus plecostomus was 6 times that value. Pterygoplichthys wasn't commonly listed as an import, suggesting that the distinction between the species hadn't been made, or the fish were still uncommon imports. A point in that this is the real Hypostomus plecostomus theory is that the great bulk of pleco imports came from Trinidad and nearby Jamaica. Another thing leading to the decline of Hypostomus plecostomus in the trade was the seasonal import restrictions placed on Trinidad. As far as I know, Brazil had no such restriction, so importers could just bring in Pterygoplichthys all year round. Pterygoplichthys are reportedly a more prolific fish than Hypostomus, so the choice of catfish to spawn in mass quantities for the hobby was obvious. Books printed around the time do distinguish Hypostomus from the then new imported plecos, but when Pterygoplichthys pardalus became the dominant fish ruled as a common pleco, many websites and pet stores started to and continue to confuse the fishes. Finding any modern video reports of the OG Hypostomus plecostomus proved extremely difficult, and is part of the reason this video took as long as it did. These days, you'll have better luck finding fancy L number plecos than the OG Hypostomus plecostomus. Another reason I say rightfully is because common plecos like Crocodylus are some of the most mistreated fishes in the whole hobby. Goldfish and betas are still top 2, but Crocodylus and Monterey and common plecos has to be tied for 3rd. First of all, they are some of the few fishes typically bought for a purpose, not as a pet. The needs of the algae cleaner come second to the more colorful community fish a novice hobbyist has in the tank. They may be thrown in a tank with other issues besides algae growth, or worse, a tank without much algae in the first place. A pleco introduced after an algae problem is likely going to face a downward spiral of water conditions that will make Emperor Lemon blush. Algae is natural and grows in every open body of water sitting outside long enough, but the stuff covering the entire tank points to a light and or nutrient imbalance. In a new tank, an algal bloom is just a part of the tank maturing and doesn't require much intervention. It's there to provide some oxygen and take advantage of the resources it has access to. Novice aquarists are likely to overfeed, feed not only the fish, but bacteria and algae living in the tank. Uneaten food eventually starts to rot, introducing nitrogenous waste products and feeding harmful bacteria. Plecos may eat most organic substances that can't escape them, but fungus food is a step too far. Since the fish is brought to do its job, novice aquarists rarely give the fish a hiding place or even bother feeding it specifically, since they think that plecos thrive purely on leftovers. Starvation is a common way for a pleco to meet an early grave. In the event that people do buy specialized pleco food, Many brands are filled with wheat flour and other fillers, leading to extra waste in the tank. Many algae wafers don't even have algae as a major ingredient, relying on food coloring to get that characteristic green coloration. It's as if the fish food manufacturers use the scavenging nature of plecos and other bottom feeders as an excuse to load the algae wafers up with the cheapest ingredients. Another reported issue with pleco feeding is their tendency to latch onto the sides of large fishes when starving. Unlike Journachylus, half the aquarium hobby doesn't hate the pleco for its behavior and recognizes that the fish needs something in its guts that's not air. Because of their glass cleaning abilities and relatively peaceful nature for their size, plecos as a whole are seen in a wide variety of aquariums from basic community tanks to Mbuna thunderdomes to outdoor goldfish ponds. They're even sometimes used in aquaponic systems to control algal growth while not disturbing other fishes. This may help with disease control, as the mold buildup is processed into fecal matter that's easier to remove. Ichthyophonts tend to live in the substrate, so some enterprising scientists inoculate tilapia growth bats with ick and compare the spread of the disease with and without plecos living on the bottom. The pleco containers had less effective tilapia as the plecos reduced the available substrate for it to live on. Nowhere how badly the pleco got infected, but please don't buy plecos to help control disease. Their aforementioned shape and size make them common tank mates for large predatory fishes like Oscars. Plecos are too armored and spiky to be appetizing when big. The common plecos had a long career in the aquarium hobby. Even with other fishes replacing them for algae control, their ease of care and ready availability gives them an enduring niche in large tanks. Okay, that leviathan of a video is over. Hopefully you come away with a greater appreciation of the humble common plecos, be they Hypostomus plecostomus or Pterygoplichthys. Feel free to post your pleco pit experience in the comments, even if you just saw one in passing at a friend's house or a dentist's office. You know what to do if you want to hear about vintage fish and sports car racing. This is an Adaptations signing off. Adios.